Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 122, which is called The Puppet Battle, and this was a little bit of a mixed bag of an episode for me. I thought it was, in general, alright, but it definitely has some problems. Mainly, I think that the fight that we got here, the title of the episode, Puppet Battle, it wasn't particularly that great of a fight, and I actually felt like it was probably on the weaker side of fights we've even seen in the across like the entire Boruto anime. That's how kind of disappointed I was with it. Then the main sort of plot dynamic of the episode I also felt was a little muddled in what they were trying to get at, but it could be decent setup for future on in the arc when they commit to doing a little bit more with it. But let's get into it. The fight itself, like I said, Kankuro versus these Toneri puppets. My issue with the fight was that it really felt like undynamic. Like it felt like it was just super by the numbers. Like they weren't willing to do anything over the top. It was just Kankuro summons some puppets. He uses one or two of his more standard techniques that he's been using from super early on in the series, and that's really about it. The puppets reveal that they're actually much more durable. They turn the tables on him. He has to blow everything up to sort of sacrifice himself to stop them, but the leader of the puppets still manages to kind of escape and find his way to Shinki. And that's really it. The problem with this is that the fight was meant to be this sort of Kankuro staying behind, heroic sacrifice, puppet versus puppet, armies basically. Kankuro as being, I suppose, roughly the main puppet master ninja in the series at this point, really didn't show that. He felt incredibly weak in this fight, that he was like, it was like Kankuro was back to like early Shippuden kind of Kankuro level, where like he's good, but he's not that good, and nothing particularly new in his jutsu apart from maybe that he's controlling a few more puppets than we've seen him control before, but just he wasn't using them that well, I think was the main issue. It felt like the animators sort of struggled to create a dynamic fight scene based around these puppets and what was going on here, and it just felt really quick, kind of rushed in a way, and they did what they had to do here. And especially when you title the episode Puppet Battle, and that's a super weak, I think, part of the episode, it definitely is a big letdown for an episode that was kind of hyped up. As for the plot of the episode, the main one would be, I suppose, Boruto and Shinki's dynamic. We start off with an interesting comparison from Shikaku to Boruto, talking to Boruto about, Shinki reminds him a bit of old Gaara, and that Naruto was the one who kind of helped Gaara to see that there was more to life than just hatred, and kind of opened him up to kind of caring about people more, and I suppose what love actually is, kind of in a way. And, very powerful arc from original Naruto, and I like that being brought up here. Even if it wasn't the greatest comparison, because trying to compare Gaara to Shinki right now, given what the issue is here, feels a little bit of a stretch. But the idea of the both characters ultimately feeling a little bit like disconnected, that they don't really show their care for their companions type thing, that fits, and that Gaara needed someone like Naruto, Shinki's going to need someone like Boruto to really open him up and kind of have him be just that little bit more emotional. Because the dynamic they ultimately go on in this episode is that Kankuro having to blow himself up, basically, draws everyone to the scene of what's going on. So everyone notices that, oh, something's happened to Kankuro, we have to go check him out. But does our mission come first, or do we put prioritizing saving a friend, a comrade? So this creates the conflict with Shinki and Boruto. Shinki, despite Kankuro being his uncle, is like, no, we have to go ahead with the mission. This was the sacrifice I knew he would likely have to make. And then Boruto immediately wants to go back for Kankuro to try and help him, save him if he's still going. And I liked this idea when they brought it up first. This is a cool dynamic to see how they go about doing this. This is clearly, Shinki's been the characters they've been set up to have something going on with, that he's going to have to learn something. So is he going to eventually realize that there's value to sidetracking the mission a little bit to save someone you deeply care about? And the episode seemed to borderline take it in the opposite direction and be like, no, this isn't a Shinki learning to be like more open with his emotions and, caring about his comrades more. This is Boruto needing to learn about duty, and it's kind of like, really? Like, this has been a subtle kind of arc for Boruto in a lot of the arcs up to now, the idea that he kind of goes off the rails on some of these missions a lot of the times, and so he's very willing to put his friends above everything else, including the mission, and that's great. But okay, I can see some value in focusing him on the mission, but it's almost an arc with Boruto and the type of character that he is that doesn't really mean all that much, because I don't think Boruto just doesn't care about the mission. He just will prioritize keeping everyone safe above just directly, the accomplishing of the mission. That, leaving someone behind to sacrifice themselves kind of isn't in his playbook. And in most cases in Naruto, that is the series, value to a T. That is the definition of the Kakashi quote, 100%. That Kakashi quote is so important. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. That quote is so meaningful. It's one of the most powerful kind of moments in kind of all of Naruto, and it's character defining for Kakashi. And realistically, that is something that applies to nearly all of our sort of hero characters in Naruto. Yet here's an episode that tries to kind of take it down the other path in a way. Boruto comes back, and Tamari and Shikadai are there, and she's kind of immediately like, why are you here? You abandoned Shinki to come here and save Kankuro? I appreciate that you did that and that it shows you're caring, but did you really not think Shinki didn't care about his uncle? He does, he just doesn't show it, and it's kind of like, I can appreciate what they're sort of going for here, in terms of setting up Shinki and Boruto's next meeting, and Boruto having a slightly different impression of Shinki, and then Shinki I think still needing to understand that value, that property that Boruto has, that Gaara said that Boruto has, that Shinki doesn't have. We're still waiting for all that stuff to sort of come together here. I just thought the start of this conversation with Tamari was a little bit all over the place with regards to this quote. Thankfully, in the second half, when she was finishing up giving her advice to Boruto, she did address it to a degree by basically saying that, look, it's always difficult as a shinobi to know when to prioritize the mission or your friends, and in a situation like this, it is complicated, and you have to really. It's a tough kind of thing to gain that insight into what is right and what is wrong, and very clearly we have characters who basically lie on both sides of that equation. Boruto will pretty much always go back for his friends, and then Shinki will pretty much always prioritize the mission. The problem in all this is that I didn't quite like that the shift in sort of character arc seemed to focus more on Boruto needing to learn about duty, whereas I think it's much more interesting and more of a character thing of Shinki learning to be kind of open himself up a little bit more, gain that same understanding that Gaara gained from Naruto from Boruto. I think that's a much more interesting arc, in that I don't really know what value there is to Boruto learns about duty. He has that duty. It's just he also values his friends, and his duty in a way is to his friends, and that's kind of Boruto. That is Boruto's character. That was Naruto's character kind of as well. He did roughly the same things. That's that quote again. Those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. That is such a big statement from one of your quintessential ninjas in the show. How can you really make the argument kind of against it? And I can see what they were trying to do here with the idea that even though Shinki didn't say it, he had 100% faith in Kankuro that he would accomplish that goal. He would either defeat the enemy or die taking the enemy down with him. And Shinki could accept that because he cared and respected Kankuro. That is fine. It's just that if he does care that much in Naruto, given what the values of the show are, he should show it a little bit more outwardly. And I think ultimately that's probably what they're getting at, is that a lot of the conflict between Boruto and Shinki would never really happen if Shinki was a little bit less guarded, if he was more open with his communication towards Boruto, if he had said something along those lines of like, we have to prioritize protecting Shikaku, I really care about my uncle, but he stayed behind for a reason, and if we go there and Shikaku gets, if he had explained it more, kind of got into connected to Boruto to get his connection with his uncle across, he could have convinced Boruto, but he didn't. And that's, I think, the problem here of like, Tamari is close to Shinki, of course, because they're family. She knows that there is this side of him where he really, really cares about, Kankuro, Gaara, those type of characters. He just doesn't show it outwardly. Boruto, all he's seen is this guy be exceptionally rude to him the entire time, kind of looking down on him of like, why is this Leaf guy with me? What does he have that I don't have? And not really caring to see what Boruto kind of has to offer. So from Boruto's perspective, like, I think you can get why, like, it feels a little bit like harsh on Boruto in this episode that, it's like, does Boruto just have to accept all of this guy's, terrible attitude, just because deep down he never says it to anyone except like his family that he does care. Like, you can see why Boruto really did kind of take such an issue with it in all of that. In that, I think this arc has just been a little weird in that way, with regards to like, Kankuro sort of scolded Boruto for like, oh, do you really need people to talk to you nicely? Like, can you not just accept his bluntness? It felt a little bit like, what are we kind of doing with Shinki in this arc, where like, it's the other characters kind of defending his personality, and all the while Shinki himself is doing nothing to really show any growth. So I'm waiting in this arc for the moment where we really see Boruto, Shinki, make that connection. Realize what Gaara said to him. What is it that Boruto has that Shinki lacks? And what situation is it going to arise in where he needs to gain that understanding? And could it be as simple as just Boruto coming back, like the setup at the end of the episode for next week, that Shinki's left on his own to fight the leader of the puppets to defend Shikaku? The puppet seems strong enough, obviously, to take out Kankuro, so Shinki shouldn't be able to really handle this, so he's going to be in trouble. The arrival of Boruto on the scene, coming back for Shinki, making that connection could be the thing that really opens the door. But what are they going for here? Because again, they're doing this whole Boruto and Judy plot, they're doing this whole, Shinki and his, caring about his comrades. How do we get from here to here? Like, I'm not really seeing the connection just yet, because it's been a little muddled with the way they've been going about it. Right at the end of the episode, we do see the escape of Urashiki. He breaks free of the sand mausoleum, and so he's out. I really didn't expect that to happen in the episode this early on. I felt like they would save that until pretty much the last episode. Like, we'd deal with the main plot, a lot of our characters would return to prepare for the battle against him. Again, I think the ending of this arc, whatever they do with it, is very dependent on if the arc is actually going to deal with Urashiki. Is this where we address, is he alive currently in the Boruto manga, or is this the arc where he meets his end, whether that be him getting sealed away, or killed, or setting up something? That's the big question in all of this. It feels like they're committing to something fairly big, because he's an Otsutsuki. He's a very tricky Otsutsuki. Like, Sasuke is going to come back at some point. There's also the idea that we're heading to the Leaf. At this point, I'm not really sure if we're even going to get to the point where the Leaf characters are going to be introduced, because it feels like we're still very focused on the sand right now, and it doesn't feel like we're making too much progress to get directly to the Leaf. So, like, will Naruto get involved in this arc? Other characters from the Leaf Village. I'm not entirely sure. I think they're going to keep it somewhat contained to the sand here, meaning we won't maybe get the opportunity to keep everyone involved. But if this is going to be the end of Urashiki, I feel you almost have to involve Naruto in that in some way. But again, we'll have to wait and see. Just as well as that, I suppose, the fact that Shikaku did mention Naruto and Gaara's past, I think that probably highlights the idea that Naruto will play a role coming towards the end of this arc, and maybe Boruto and Shinki seeing Naruto and Gaara and their interactions back and forth might be the thing that opens the door for them to kind of gain the same sort of understanding. But again, well, we have to wait and see on a lot of that. Yes, the episode's still, relatively weak with regards to the fighting. I really couldn't connect too much to the plot kind of character arc they were trying to go for here, like I explained. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. How did you like the way they did this? Where do you think the arc is going? Do you think it's going to be the big, dealing with Urashiki arc, or is this just like an arc where we're going to use Urashiki, but he's still going to be out there? But anyway, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.